at the bloody beginning of the film out there. There's so much rain. I should get a little boat paraffin wax.
There you go. She's all ready, Captain.
Thanks, Billy.
Hello and welcome to Real Opinions, and today I'm going to be reviewing It. So in case you don't know, I'm going to do the brief obligatory plot synopsis, but It is set in the fictional town of Derry, Maine, this time in the 1980s to give it a kind of Amblin feel, I guess. It focuses on a group of kids called the Loser Club. They're all outcasts for various reasons, and they notice that there are a lot of kids going missing in the town of Derry, and eventually they come to the conclusion that they know what it is because they've all encountered this weird demonic clown that has the ability to shapeshift into their worst fears, and they all resolve to, like, this thing is taking kids, we've got to stop it. For whatever reason, this became one of my most anticipated films of the year, which is very, very strange because I don't really like the book that much. I've started reading it, and it's got good qualities and bad qualities in almost equal measure. And I think that the mini-series with Tim Curry absolutely sucks. But for some reason, this just became the film that I was most looking forward to this year over Star Wars. I don't know why, but I guess I just got lured in by the promise of a big budget, high profile horror movie, which we don't really get nowadays. Like, horror movies are cheap. So yeah, I was super, super excited for this, and all the trailers, all the marketing really, really put a lot of faith in it for me, and I know a lot of other people out there are equally as excited. I want to say that this film is definitely one you should go and see. If you are kind of apprehensive about it, if you don't know whether or not this is something that you want to go to the cinema for, I would absolutely recommend it, and I would encourage it, in fact, because I think we should have more films like this. Because it is good. It's not 10 out of 10 amazing, but it is good, and that is enough. That is honestly enough with the state of modern horror. It's character focused, it's well written, it's got some invention, some visual flair, and it just has character and charm, which I cannot say for the legion of Blumhouse films. Regardless of whether or not you think they're scary, that's kind of all they have. They have that sort of very ephemeral quality where you watch them, boo, and then you leave and you never think about them again. Whereas I left this film and I've been thinking about it, I've been thinking about the things I loved, the things I didn't love as much, but it's actually left an impression. I think I want to start with the biggest strength, which was definitely the characters and the performances. Everyone in this film is great. The kids, as I'm sure you've read 1,000 times in reviews, the kids are fantastic. They are every bit as good as the kids you would get in your Stranger Things or your Super 8s or even your Goonies. They really have a believable chemistry. And it was that thing where, like, you were watching them and it didn't feel like movie kids, it felt like real kids. They were talking to each other and interacting in a way that was very recognisable. And I genuinely thought back at times to my own childhood and sort of had, if I didn't remember moments exactly like that, I remembered feelings that they were having in those moments that were just like, yeah, that is what it was like to be a kid. And though I can assure you there'll be at least one of these kids that you completely identify with. All of them get quite a bit of development, and in a way that doesn't feel draggy or slow. It's not like we have an hour of just getting to know the characters and then Pennywise shows up. They let you know the characters whilst also furthering the plot. You get to know them through the horror sequences, through what they're afraid of, and it works really, really well. They manage to keep the pace going and still give a good amount of time to all of the characters, which is very impressive because there's like 8 of them. There are a lot of characters to get through, and apart from maybe 1 or 2, they all feel like they get a proper introduction and a proper arc. And they do get a proper arc. It's not like it's forgotten once the horror starts. They all basically get a through line throughout the movie, which was fantastic. The script is equally strong. It's quite funny, which I also thought worked really well. It was a surprisingly funny movie, and a very well written one too. Outside of just the kids, I also want to draw attention to Bill Skarsgård, who plays Pennywise. Whenever people talk about that TV miniseries, the older version with Tim Curry, irrespective of whether they think it's good or bad, they always say Tim Curry completely anchors it and makes it what it is. Even the people who don't like it have nothing but praise for Tim Curry's performance in that film, and I don't really know why, because it never frightened me. It always kind of felt a bit annoying.
Here I am, Wheezy. Beep, beep, Richie.
You
see.
Excuse me, sir. Do you have Prince Albert in a can? You do? Well, you better let the poor guy out.
Well, my Hanlon, that I had to go, that I had to get cleaned up. Hell.
This depiction of Pennywise, on the other hand, was really enthralling. I'm not sure if I ever thought he was terrifying, but I did think that I was constantly just hooked and mesmerised whenever he was on the screen. He plays it in a way that is, I think, is much more successful for the type of film we're going for, because he doesn't feel human. Tim Curry's performance of Pennywise always felt like a kind of like a drunk hobo dressed as a clown.
Don't do any good to run, girly boy.
This Pennywise feels very ethereal, very inhuman, and that is partly his performance and partly the makeup effects and all the things that go into constructing the character. He has weird little mannerisms that are so great. Like his eyes, sometimes they're not looking in the same direction, and it's done very subtly. Or there's a sequence when he's talking to Georgie and in the sewer grate looking up, and you notice there's just like a little bit of drool coming down while he's still talking and smiling, and it's really quite unsettling and unnerving. And I thought his performance was great, and especially when he was being kind of funny, I thought he was fantastic, and I really liked him, and I really liked the sparing use of him. Compared to that miniseries, he doesn't appear that much in this, but every time he does appear, it is with impact, and he makes a lasting impression in not that much screen time. I'm not saying that it's not like Gareth Edwards' Godzilla, where Pennywise is completely relegated, you never see him, but he spends most of the film in his other forms. There's a lot of visual effects in this film. I'd say most of them are CGI. Luckily, they're done well. And luckily, it's always for an imaginative purpose. It's not just like, here's a CGI ghost, ooh. They get Pennywise to do like bodily contortions and things that you just could not do without the aid of visual effects. So whilst there is a lot of visual effects, I thought they were used appropriately. The big thing with this film, and the thing that makes me a little tentative about praising it too much, is that I didn't think it was that scary. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've come to really kind of think of it less as a horror film and more as a Stranger Things Super 8 style adventure film. And when I think of it like that, I think it is a damn good example of one. As I said, all of the kids' bonding stuff is really strong and really well executed. And it does have that fun, adventurous tone of a Goonies or of a Poltergeist. Or even Krampus, for a more recent example. I would say if you think of this more in the sort of vein of Krampus, where it's trying to be fun rather than scary, I think you will enjoy this maybe more than if you went into it expecting something that was properly blood-curdling. I think the reason it can't be quite as frightening as it needs to be is because of its, I guess it's R in America, it's a 15 for us. So it can't be too graphic or visceral, and it isn't ever too psychologically scarring. A lot of the scare sequences feel a bit more like they could have come from something like The Conjuring. As I said, it elevates itself above those films because it does so well with the characters and the performances. And so instead of trying to make it too scary, they decide to capitalise on the Stranger Things adventure tone. And that worked. At least they realised they weren't going to be too scary, and so went in another direction. Other than that, there's nothing about this film that's bad. The score is really strong. It does the sort of creepy child, lullaby-y, nursery rhyme type thing, but it does it in a way that works, and it's actually quite catchy, so I liked that. Sometimes it feels a bit overstated, the score, like in the horror moments it can be very like, loud noise, but it has memorable motifs, and it was effective. I thought it was a good score. Cinematography is good, the visuals are inventive, and as I said, the cast and the script are superb. It also fixes the ending, which was another thing. It fixes the shitty ending of this is obviously only the first half of the book, but it completely changes it and does it in a much better way. One that doesn't feel like it's jumping the shark. Like, it gets into the more fantastical elements of the story towards the end, but it doesn't do it in a way that just loses credibility. So overall, I would recommend this film. I would recommend it as a fun, well-made adventure with horror elements rather than as a particularly amazing horror film. I just hope that if we're going into part 2, which is when they are adults, that they play up the horror or make it something more frightening, because they won't have that Stranger Things vibe to rest on. they won't be able to pull off the nostalgic 80s fun kids adventure thing. But with Bill Skarsgård's performance here, I think they have something they can really use, and they're lucky with that.